The night was cold and silent in the alien prison camp. Metal walls creaked in the wind and the air smelled of smoke and old blood. Somewhere far away, machines hummed like tired ghosts. Inside one of the small cells sat Lyra, a young woman from the alien race called the Therans. Her silver eyes stared at the floor, her thin hands shaking. She had been told stories all her life, stories about humans. They were called monsters, destroyers, the race that turned stars into weapons and burned whole worlds for fun. And now, one of those monsters was guarding her cell. Lyra pulled her thin blanket around her shoulders, trying to stop her shivering. Every sound outside made her heart jump. She had seen other guards before, cruel, loud, shouting in a strange language. But this one was different. He didn't yell. He didn't hit anyone. He just walked slowly, quietly, watching. His name, she had heard, was Sergeant Cole. That night, as the camp lights dimmed, Lyra heard the sound that made her blood freeze. Boots. Heavy, slow, echoing against the metal floor. He's coming. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. Maybe he had come to hurt her, or to take someone away again. The humans had strange rules for the prisoners. Some were taken out and never came back. Cole's shadow appeared outside her door. Lyra's breath caught. The door opened with a hiss. He stood there, tall, tired, with eyes that looked like they had seen too many wars. His armor was scratched and dirty. He held something in his hands, a small metal tray. Lyra waited for him to shout, to threaten her. But he said nothing. He just looked at her for a moment, then placed the tray inside the cell. A piece of bread, some water. Then he turned and walked away. Lyra didn't move. She stared at the food for a long time. Why didn't he say anything? Why didn't he laugh? Why didn't he hit me like the others? Her stomach growled, but she didn't touch it. Maybe it was poisoned. Maybe it was a trick. She sat there in the dark, hugging her knees, waiting for something terrible to happen. Hours passed. Then she heard something again, the sound of metal clinking. She crawled to the bars and looked out quietly. A dim light flickered at the end of the hall. Cole was there, sitting on the floor beside another cell. Inside was an old Theran man, barely breathing. His face was pale, his body thin. Cole took off his helmet. His hair was dark, his face covered in dirt and scars. He opened his pack and took out a piece of bread, his own meal. Lyra watched, confused, as he broke it in half and gave the larger piece to the dying alien. The old Theran weakly took it, hands shaking. Cole gave him water, too. He didn't speak much, just stayed there until the alien stopped shaking and began to breathe slowly again. Then Cole leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment like he was exhausted. Lyra didn't understand. She had seen humans kill her friends. She had seen ships burn her city, her home, her family. Every story said humans had no hearts. They enjoyed war. They laughed at pain, so why was this one helping the enemy? The next morning, when light entered the camp again, she saw Cole walking through the hallway, checking each cell quietly. His steps were slow. He looked more like a man carrying guilt than a monster filled with hate. When he reached her cell, their eyes met for the first time. Lyra felt her chest tighten. She expected anger. But his eyes didn't have it. They only had something strange, sadness. He placed another tray of food through the bars and said softly, almost like he was speaking to himself, "You should eat." His voice wasn't rough or cold. It was calm, tired. Lyra didn't reply. She couldn't. She just stared as he walked away again. For the first time since the war began, she didn't know what to believe. That night, the wind screamed outside the prison walls. The power flickered on and off, making shadows move like ghosts. Lyra sat by the food tray again, thinking. The bread was cold now. Still, she touched it, slowly, carefully. It smelled like something real. Her stomach ached. Finally, she tore off a small piece and put it in her mouth. It wasn't poisoned. It was just bread. She ate in silence, her thoughts louder than the storm outside. Maybe he's trying to trick me, she told herself. But another thought whispered inside her mind, one she couldn't ignore. What if he's not a monster? Outside, Cole walked through the dark corridor again. He stopped near her cell for a moment but didn't look in. Instead, he stood still, staring at the wall as if he was lost in his own memories. Then he moved on. Lyra lay awake the rest of the night. She could still see his face, those tired human eyes. They didn't look like the eyes of a killer. They looked like the eyes of someone who had already lost too much. When morning came, smoke rose from the east side of the camp. Lyra didn't know what was happening, but she could hear soldiers shouting. She pulled her blanket close, heart racing again, and for the first time, instead of thinking about escape or revenge, she thought about one question: who really started this war? Because now she wasn't sure she knew the truth anymore. The morning came with a gray sky and cold wind. Smoke still rose from somewhere beyond the walls. The air in the prison camp felt heavier than before. Prisoners whispered quietly, afraid of what might happen next. Inside her small cell, Lyra sat near the wall, holding the small piece of bread she had saved from the night before. She had eaten only half. The rest she kept, she didn't even know why. Maybe it made her feel a little safer. Footsteps echoed again in the hallway. She froze. The same heavy, slow steps. Sergeant Cole. Her hands trembled as she quickly hid the bread under her blanket. The sound grew closer, closer, until he stopped in front of her cell. The door opened with a small hiss. Lyra looked up but said nothing. Cole stood there in silence, his armor scratched and his eyes tired as always. He placed a new tray of food through the bars, bread, water, a small piece of fruit, and quietly looked at the untouched food from yesterday. He noticed the missing half. Their eyes met for a brief second. He didn't smile, didn't speak, but a small softness appeared on his face, like a silent thank you. Then he turned and walked away. Lyra waited until his footsteps disappeared. Only then did she crawl to the tray. She touched the bread again, smelled it, then bit into it slowly. It tasted real, warm, not poisoned, not a trick. Still, she couldn't stop thinking, why? Why would a human share food with her? Why would he show mercy when humans destroyed her world? Later that day, she peeked through the small gap in her cell door. Across the corridor, she saw other prisoners, weak, hungry, hopeless. Cole passed by each cell, placing food quietly, saying nothing. Some shouted at him. Others threw the food away. One even spat at him, but Cole didn't react. He just picked up the tray, sighed, and kept walking. Lyra watched in silence. It confused her. Every story she knew about humans told her they were cruel, that they enjoyed watching others suffer. But this one seemed different. That night, the camp lights flickered. Rain started to fall outside, tapping against the metal roofs. The air smelled like rust and fire. Lyra couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the human guard. Was he truly kind? Or was this just another human trick to make her trust him? She pulled her blanket tighter and stared at the wall, lost in thought. The next morning, things were worse. A group of alien prisoners tried to escape. They attacked a guard tower at dawn. Alarms screamed across the camp. Gunshots echoed. Everyone panicked. Lyra hid behind the corner of her cell, heart racing. She expected Cole to come storming in, angry and violent. But instead, when she finally saw him, he was helping a wounded guard, lifting him from the ground and dragging him to safety. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't firing his weapon wildly like the others. He just looked calm, focused. When the shooting stopped and silence returned, the floor was covered in dust and smoke. 2 aliens were dead. The others were locked back in their cells. Cole passed by her cell again, his face covered in dirt. He didn't look at her this time. He just stood outside for a moment, breathing heavily, then moved on. Lyra didn't know why, but her chest hurt a little when she saw how tired he looked. Days passed. The rhythm became the same. Morning food, evening silence. No words between them, only small gestures. Sometimes he brought her a little extra water. Sometimes he stayed longer near her cell, as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. And sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, Lyra saw him pull out a small photo from his pocket, a picture of 2 children, one human, one alien, smiling together. He would stare at it for a few seconds, then hide it again. Lyra didn't understand, but she could see sadness in his eyes every time. One evening, thunder rolled across the dark sky. Power flickered again, leaving parts of the camp in darkness. Cole was doing his last patrol. Lyra heard voices, angry voices, from another part of the corridor. 2 other human soldiers were talking. Their voices were rough and cruel. "These aliens don't deserve food," one said. "They killed my unit," the other spat. "If it was up to me, I'd burn the whole camp." Cole's voice cut through the darkness, calm but firm. "That's enough. Go back to your post." "You're too soft, Cole," one of them growled. Maybe, he said quietly. But I'm still human. Lyra's eyes widened, still human. The words echoed in her mind. She couldn't understand what he meant, but she felt something shift inside her heart. When the other guards left, Cole stood alone in the hallway, his back to her cell. The storm outside grew louder. Rain poured like metal beads on the roof. The night began like any other. Cold wind, soft rain, and the distant hum of the security drones flying over the alien prison camp. But something in the air felt different this time. Too still, too quiet. Lyra sat on the floor of her cell watching the small light flicker on the ceiling. She hadn't seen Sergeant Cole since morning. His last words replayed in her head again and again. Stay inside. Whatever happens today, don't move. Those words kept echoing like a warning. She didn't know why, but fear crawled back into her chest. Every noise made her flinch. Every shadow looked alive. The war outside was supposed to be over, so why did it feel like it was coming back? Sometime past midnight the sound began, a low rumble. Then, an explosion. The ground shook beneath her. Dust fell from the ceiling. The alarm screamed to life, red lights flashing through the corridors. Lyra jumped to her feet, heart racing. Shouts filled the air, humans yelling, aliens screaming. Something big was happening. She ran to the door, pressing her face against the bars. Through the flashing red light she saw chaos, guards running, smoke pouring in from one side of the hallway. Then she heard it. Alien voices. Not prisoners. Fighters. A Theran raiding group had attacked the camp. They weren't there to rescue. They were there to destroy. Lyra's hands trembled. She didn't know what to do. More explosions, gunfire, screams. The smell of burning metal filled the air. A human soldier ran past her cell, firing down the corridor. Then he fell. A laser bolt hit him in the chest. Lyra covered her mouth, trying not to cry out. The battle was getting closer. She crouched near the back wall, heart hammering so hard it hurt. The lock on her cell door sparked from the heat. Smoke began to fill the room, choking her. Then through the thick air she saw him, Sergeant Cole. He was running down the hall, blood on his arm, dirt on his face, shouting orders to the other soldiers. But most of them were gone or dead. He saw the burning cells, the trapped prisoners, and his jaw tightened. He started breaking open the locks one by one, using his code key. Lyra could hardly breathe as he reached her door. He looked inside. She was coughing. Terrified, he shouted over the noise, "Can you walk?" She stared at him, too shocked to answer. He didn't wait. He pressed the key against the panel and the door hissed open. Smoke rushed in. Lyra stepped back, afraid. She still didn't trust him fully, not yet. But then the ceiling cracked above her, and fire burst down near her feet. She screamed. Cole rushed in, grabbed her arm, and pulled her out just before the flames spread. "Run!" he yelled. She hesitated for a second, then ran beside him through the dark hallway filled with smoke and gunfire. The camp was collapsing. Alarms wailed like dying animals. Sirens flashed across the burning night. They passed several dead guards, both human and alien. Lyra's eyes were wide, terrified. She had seen war before, but this was different. This time the man saving her was the same kind she had once called a monster. They reached a doorway blocked by debris. Cole dropped his rifle and began pushing heavy metal pieces aside. His hands bled, but he didn't stop. Why are you helping me?" Lyra gasped, coughing from the smoke. Cole didn't look back. "Because you shouldn't die here," he said. "No one should." He finally cleared a small space in the wall, just enough for her to crawl through. "You go first," he said, trying to catch his breath. She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." She crawled through the hole, pulling herself out into the cold rain. The air outside was fresh compared to the burning camp. She turned around and saw him still inside, trying to help another injured soldier. "Come on," she shouted, her voice shaking. He pushed the wounded man out first, then climbed out himself. The moment he did, the roof behind them collapsed with a loud crash. Fire shot up into the night sky. They both fell to the ground, covered in mud and ash. Cole coughed, pulling off his helmet. "We have to move," he said. Lyra nodded weakly. She could barely stand, but he grabbed her arm again and led her into the forest behind the camp. They ran through the trees, hearing the explosions fade behind them. The rain poured harder, washing away the smell of smoke. Lyra's feet slipped on the wet ground. She fell once, scraping her hands, but Cole lifted her back up without saying a word. They kept moving until the sound of battle was far away. Finally, they stopped near a small cave at the edge of a rocky hill. Cole looked around carefully before leading her inside. He dropped his pack, checked his weapon, then sat down exhausted. Lyra sat across from him shaking, her heart still pounding from fear. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the sound of rain echoed from outside, then finally she whispered, "You could have left me." Cole didn't look at her. He stared at the ground, his voice quiet and rough. "I know. Then why didn't you?" He sighed, wiping blood from his arm. "Because I'm tired of seeing people die for no reason." Lyra watched him carefully. There was no anger in his eyes, no hate, only pain. Minutes passed in silence. She kept thinking about how he ran back into the fire, how he opened her cell instead of escaping. He could have saved himself, but he didn't, and that confused her more than anything else. She finally said softly, "You're not like the others." He gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe not. Maybe I'm worse." She didn't understand what he meant, but there was sadness in his voice that made her stop asking questions. Cole leaned back against the wall, breathing slowly. "We'll rest here for a while," he said. "Then we move before sunrise." Lyra nodded, hugging her knees. The fear in her chest was still there, but something else was growing now. A strange feeling she hadn't known since the war began. Trust. As the night went on, the rain outside softened. Lyra watched him quietly. His armor was damaged, his face tired, but there was something steady about him, something strong and human in the best way. For the first time, she didn't see him as a monster. She saw him as a man who had risked everything to save her. When he finally fell asleep sitting against the wall, she whispered to herself, "Maybe not all humans are the same." Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the forest. In the distance, the camp burned, smoke rising like ghosts into the dark clouds. Lyra turned her eyes away and closed them slowly. She didn't know what would happen next or where they would go. But one thing was certain. Her old world, the one where all humans were monsters, had already ended. The prison was silent that night. Too silent. Lyra sat in the corner of her cold cell, staring at the food Sergeant Cole had given her earlier. It was simple, just bread and stew. But to her, it meant something more, and it meant choice. For the first time, she wasn't forced, threatened, or shouted at. He had simply placed it there and walked away. Outside, the wind howled through the broken fences. The sky above the camp was dark red, filled with heavy clouds and the faint glow of distant fires. The war might have ended, but the world around them was still burning. Then, the alarm screamed. Red lights flashed across the camp walls. Lyra jumped up, heart racing. The sound of shouting filled the air, not from humans, but from Tharan prisoners. She ran to the bars, looking out. Smoke rose from the far end of the camp. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Cole appeared in the corridor, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. But he wasn't shouting orders. He was running straight toward the danger. "Stay inside," he called out as he passed her cell. His voice was deep, calm, but she heard something else in it. Fear. Not for himself, but for them. Lyra pressed her face against the bars, watching him disappear into the smoke. She didn't know what to do. Other prisoners were screaming, trying to escape. Some shouted, "The humans are killing us again." Others blamed her people for starting a fight. But then, through the smoke, she saw them. Tharan raiders. Her own kind. They had broken in to rescue the prisoners. But something was off. They were shooting wildly, hitting both humans and Tharans. It was chaos. Cole returned, dragging an injured human soldier behind him. His face was covered in ash, his uniform torn. He stopped by a control panel, pressed a few buttons, and several cell doors unlocked. But not all. He was freeing both sides. "Go!" he shouted to anyone who could move. "Get to the south gate." Lyra froze. She didn't understand. Why would a human open the cells of his enemies? Why would he risk his life for prisoners who might kill him? She stepped out slowly, her legs shaking. Around her, Tharans ran past, some helping others, some escaping alone. But she stayed. Her eyes searched through the thick smoke until she saw him again, trying to carry another wounded soldier. This one, a Tharan. "Cole," she shouted for the first time. He looked up, surprised. "What are you doing?" "Go!" She hesitated. Why are you helping us?" He didn't answer. He just gritted his teeth and kept moving. The ceiling above them groaned. Fire spread across the roof and part of it collapsed. Lyra ran forward, pushing rubble aside, trying to help him pull the wounded soldier free. The firelight reflected in her eyes, and for the first time, he saw no hate there, only confusion and courage. "Hold this," he said, handing her his weapon. "Keep it safe." Lyra stared at it. The weapon felt heavy, strange. Humans had used these to destroy her cities. Now one was trusting her with it. They dragged the wounded soldier out together, coughing as smoke filled their lungs. Outside, the camp was half in ruins. Explosions echoed in the distance. Cole shouted to a group of survivors, "This way!" But as they ran, a Theron raider aimed his rifle at Cole. Lyra didn't think. She moved. The shot rang out, and smoke drifted across the horizon, turning the sunrise into a dull, blood-colored glow. The prison camp was gone, burned to the ground. All that remained were ashes, twisted metal, and silence. Lyra stood among the ruins, clutching a tattered blanket around her shoulders. Her once bright eyes were dull with exhaustion, but inside them, something new flickered, uncertainty and perhaps hope. Around her, survivors, both human and Theron, moved slowly, helping the wounded. No one was giving orders now. The war had ended, the guards were dead or gone, and the chain of command had vanished overnight. And yet one man still worked tirelessly, never stopping. Sergeant Cole. He moved through the wreckage, carrying food, water, and bandages. His hands were black with soot, his uniform torn and blood-stained. But he never once looked tired. Every time someone cried out, he went. Every time someone fell, he lifted them up. Lyra watched him quietly from a distance. She still couldn't understand him. Every story she'd ever heard about humans said they were monsters, cold, cruel, selfish. But this man was different. He knelt beside a Theron child who had lost his parents. The boy flinched when Cole reached out, but the soldier only smiled softly and handed him a small metal charm from his pocket. "It's from Earth," Cole said gently. "It means hope." The boy didn't understand his words, but he held the charm tightly anyway. Lyra's heart twisted. Hope. It was a word she hadn't believed in for years. As the day went on, the group began to travel away from the camp, searching for shelter. The wind was sharp and cold, blowing across endless plains of dust. The war had destroyed everything. Cities, roads, even the air felt poisoned by what had been done. Cole led them carefully, using his compass and maps. The survivors, human and Theron alike, followed him because no one else knew what to do. But tension hung between them like a shadow. Many Therons still whispered behind his back. Some wanted revenge, others just fear. Lyra walked near the front, close enough to watch him, but far enough to run if things went wrong. At dusk, they found the ruins of an old research outpost. Broken walls, scattered equipment, and a few working lights flickering in the wind. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. As the group settled inside, Lyra noticed something. Cole was sitting alone by the fire, cleaning his rifle, but his hands were trembling. Not from cold, from pain. A wound on his arm was bleeding badly. He tried to hide it, but she saw it clearly. Quietly, she approached him. He didn't look up when she spoke. "You're hurt," she said softly. "I'm fine," he replied, his voice low. "You're not." Cole sighed and finally met her gaze. "There are others worse than me." Still, she knelt beside him, pulling out a small vial of medicine she had hidden since before the war. It was Theron-made, but it still worked on humans. She poured a few drops over his wound. He flinched but didn't stop her. "Why are you helping me?" he asked after a long silence. Lyra looked at him, her eyes calm. "You gave food to those who hated you. You opened the cells. You saved a child who wasn't yours. Why did you do that?" He didn't answer right away. The fire crackled between them. Finally, he said quietly, "Because someone has to stop the cycle. If we keep hating, there won't be anyone left." His words sank deep into her heart. For years, her people had called humans destroyers. But sitting beside him now, she began to wonder, what if humans were not the monsters, but the mirror? Later that night, while most slept, a storm rolled across the plains. Thunder rumbled like distant guns. Lyra woke suddenly when she heard movement outside. She slipped from her blanket and peered into the dark. Cole was standing near the broken fence, staring into the storm. His face looked lost, haunted. "Can't sleep?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "Too many ghosts," She stepped closer, her voice almost a whisper. Do humans dream of them too? He gave a tired smile. Every night, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating his face for a moment, scarred, tired, but full of something she hadn't seen before, sorrow. Lyra stood beside him, silent, letting the storm wash over them both, and in that silence, something broke, not in fear, but in understanding. The next morning, they found new tracks near the outpost, fresh footprints, not human or Theron. Someone or something had been watching them during the night. Cole's expression hardened. We're not alone. The survivors looked at him in fear. Lyra's pulse quickened. A new danger was coming. The war had ended, but their fight for survival had only just begun. The sun rose pale and weak, painting the shattered landscape in dull gray light. Smoke still hung in the air, whispering of everything lost. The small group of survivors, humans and Therans, stood silently around the outpost, staring at the footprints that had appeared during the night. Cole knelt down, brushing the dirt with his fingers. The prints were deep, wide, and uneven, too large for human boots, too heavy for Therans. Lyra's heart thudded. What is it? He looked up slowly. Not us, he said. Something else. Before anyone could speak, a faint humming filled the air. The survivors turned toward the sound. Over the ridge, a metal shape rose, a sleek black drone scanning lights cutting through the dust. Then more appeared. Lyra froze. She knew that sound. It's the Enforcers, she whispered. The machines they used at the end of the war. The Enforcers weren't human. They weren't Theran. They were the leftover weapons from both sides. Automated machines programmed to destroy anything that moved. The war had ended, but the machines hadn't stopped. Cole's voice was firm. Everyone inside, now! They rushed into the ruins, barricading the door with debris. The sound of the drones grew louder, metal wings slicing the wind. Cole checked his rifle. The charge was almost empty. One of the Theran men shouted, They'll kill us all! We have to run! No, Cole said, standing tall. If we run, they'll pick us off. We stand together. Lyra's eyes locked on him. He wasn't shouting, but everyone listened. Even those who hated him listened. There was something unbreakable in his tone. Through a crack in the wall, Lyra saw the drones landing, 3 of them. Their red eyes glowed in the dark, scanning for movement. One of the wounded Therans panicked and ran out the back. The nearest drone turned instantly, targeting him. Before anyone could move, zap! The blast hit. The man fell, silent. Lyra covered her mouth, shaking. Cole's jaw tightened. We end this here. He turned to Lyra. You still have that Theran device? The one you used on my arm? She nodded, pulling the small vial from her pocket. Good, he said. That stuff burns through metal. Understanding flashed in her eyes. You want to use it on them? He gave a half smile. Got a better idea? Together they worked quickly. Lyra mixed the liquid with the last of their fuel cells while Cole rigged a detonator from broken equipment. The plan was simple and suicidal. Get the drones close enough, then blow the charge. When the first drone broke through the wall, Cole didn't hesitate. Now! He shouted. Lyra threw the vial into the machine's core. It hissed, melted, and exploded in sparks. The blast knocked them both down, debris raining around them. The second drone fired wildly, hitting walls and ceiling beams. Dust filled the air. Cole dragged Lyra behind cover. He aimed, fired, one shot, then another, until his rifle clicked empty. The third drone advanced, red eyes glowing brighter. It raised its cannon. Then Lyra stepped forward. No weapon, no armor. Just her voice. Stop! She shouted in her native tongue, holding up her hand. For a moment, the machine paused. The Theran code, something buried deep in its systems, still recognized her as an ally. Cole saw the chance. He grabbed a metal rod from the ground, charged forward, and struck the control core with everything he had. The drone sparked, shook, and finally collapsed. When the dust cleared, the outpost was half destroyed, but they were alive. Lyra crawled toward Cole, coughing. He was bleeding from his shoulder again, but alive. You're insane, she whispered. He smiled weakly. You said that yesterday, too. She laughed, a small, broken laugh, the first sound of peace she'd made in years. Outside, the other survivors gathered. For the first time, humans and Theran stood side by side, not as soldiers, but as survivors. One Theran elder stepped forward. The war is over, he said quietly. But what happens now? Cole looked out at the horizon, his face tired but steady. Now, he said, we build something that deserves to live. The sky above them was still cracked with smoke, but in the distance the first rays of golden light broke through. Lyra watched the sunrise beside him. She remembered the cell, the fear, the hate. She remembered how she once thought humans were monsters. Now, standing there, she understood something deeper. Monsters destroy. Humans rebuild. She turned to him. You could have let me die in that cell, she said softly. Why didn't you? He looked at her for a long time before answering. Because someone once did the same for me. The wind carried away his words, but she never forgot them. Years later, when new settlements rose where ashes once lay, they would tell the story of that night, the night a human and a Theron stood together against death, and they would say that's when the real peace began. Because kindness, once given, never truly dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to share it again.